Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen, staff. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Council for Monday, January 20th, 2014 to order. We will begin with an invocation, which I will lead, followed by the singing of the national anthem, which Councillor Papp will lead, and I would ask all to rise. Dear Lord, who has given us grace to make our common goals unto Thee, and who does promise that when two or more are gathered in Thy name, You will grant their requests. Fulfill now, O Lord, the petitions of Thy servants as may be expected of them. Grant all in this council chamber the knowledge of trust, justice, and honor in all considerations placed before them. Amen.
Amen. O Canada, our home and native land, true patron all, in all thy Son's command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you all. Thank you, Councillor Papp. We will begin with the approval of the agenda. It has been moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor King, that the agenda for the January 20th regular meeting of council be adopted. Are there any changes to the agenda? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is the pecuniary interest and disclosure thereof. That is conflicts of interest. Do any members have any conflicts of interest they need to disclose at this time? Thank you. I don't have any. Can that be so noted? Thank you. Next, we have two presentations, and I would ask the fire chief to help out with the first, and maybe the deputy mayor with the second. Okay.
You know who's boss of their voice.
Well, this evening, I have a great pleasure to present Jerry Novasil, recognition of his retirement from the fire department of 32 years service. Wow. Not too many people get to this mark. It's quite the feat. Really like to thank you for all your years of dedicated service, your contributions. I'm sure that the fire department overall is a better place because of your participation and your contributions and your leadership. So I thank you for that. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors, and for whatever reason I think that you're not going to go anywhere. So I'm sure that you'll still be around. So I thank you.
And if I might, on behalf of council, extend thank you and appreciation as well. Council and the community calls on our firefighters and relies on the service of our firefighters, the men and women who train every week, who practice, who are there, or calls in the middle of the night, as I'm sure you had your share through those 32 years as well. And it is a real dedication, it is a real service, but we also know that it's a labor of love, that you care for the community, and you've done so for 32 years. So on behalf of council and the entire community, I want to say thank you very much for your many years of service, and we sincerely appreciate it that you are always there, ready to serve and ready to help. So thank you. So if you'd like to come up now, I know that we have a couple of plaques for you.
I'd like to present you on behalf of the department and the town this memorial plaque dedicating your service.
I also have this plaque here. Congratulations and thank you very much. Thank you very much. to say anything?
I don't know what to say. It's 32 years that I've served the community, and I've made a lot of friends, and I'm really thankful to have the friends that I do have in this community. And I love the town of Pelham and all the people in it, and I hope they appreciated what I did for them.
Thank you, Jerry. Let's give him a round of applause. And okay, going through shake hands. I think council will want to shake hands as well. So thank you, Jerry.
You guys, thank you very much. Jerry, all the best. Appreciate your time.
Congratulations, Jerry. Best luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for your service, Jerry. Remember,
Thank you very
you put a
much.
couple years in Welland before you got here, too.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
You're the man, Jerry.
Thank you, Peter.
Great job.
Congratulations. Thanks for your service.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's a nice plaque, eh?
That's a real nice plaque.
thank you. And we certainly appreciate Jerry's colleagues, who many of whom he's served with for a long time, here as well to extend congratulations. So thank you for that. Next, we have a special presentation that we'd like to give, and Violet's here. She's sort of hanging her head. She doesn't like these kind of things, I know, but Violet Steingard has been recognized today, or is being recognized for her nomination to Canada's Favorite Crossing Guard Contest, and this was sponsored by FedEx Canada and Parachute, as well as her ongoing commitment to pedestrian safety by helping children make the safe journey to and from school in front of AK Wig. Violet has been employed by the town of Pelham for more than 15 years as a crossing guard. Employed is such the wrong word, because it's really, it's not employment, it's not a job, it's something you do to give back to the community. She can be found it says at the signalized crosswalk at AK Wig's school on Hay Street. And it's clear, and I know this for certain, the impact that Violet has had on the community. She serves as the students, teachers, and parents nominated her for this distinction. Although Violet's nomination was unsuccessful this year, we still wanted to recognize her and the rest of the Pelham Crossing Guard team formally for their efforts and dedication to the community throughout the year. I know a couple of times I've had the pleasure of being out there with Violet at the crossing and welcoming students as they come to school. And she knows each of them. She knows a little bit about them. She asks them how their tests are going, how their activities are going on the weekend. She really loves the kids at AK Wig and the community and the parents. And that's why it's more than a job. And that's why you are nominated for this Canada's Best Crossing Guard. So please come up and accept our appreciation and recognition of your nomination. Ellen was her first boss. There we go.
Way to go.
Do you want to say anything?
Just thank you to the parents and the kids. The parents make it fun, and they help out so much. I just love them all.
It shows. All right, thank you so much, Violet. Appreciate it. Thank you very, very much. 15 years, it's wonderful. Thank you. They want to do a picture. Stand in the middle. The rose between two thorns.
I've done that.
That's okay.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing,
Wait a minute. Right here.
Thank you again. Thank you. Give her, I don't know if, yeah, shake hands.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Still got it.
Thanks for your service, man.
Nice to wait for you in the morning.
Very much so.
Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Congratulations. Thank you so much.
Thanks again, Tyler.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.
And Alan.
Way to go.
Good old Al.
So much.
Thanks again and congratulations. Thanks, Violet. And thank you, Jerry, as well. Next, we have on our agenda delegations, and we have one delegation, and this is regarding the Ridgeville Hamlet designation. And we have Dennis Savriga and Stan Rutina. So please join us at the podium. Thank you for coming this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. My name is Dennis Savriga. I'm a former manager of current planning for the city of Niagara Falls, and also had some time in the city's engineering department. I was drawn into this by Mr. Rotina, and first I said no. And since that time, I've looked at it, gone through some of the legislation, and I'm here to see if I can convince council that perhaps Ridgeville and perhaps some of the other accompanying lands along Canberra should have some further designation to better define it from those lands that are backlands, where perhaps some consolidation of those backlands could be encouraged, and maybe the designation proposed under the Greenbelt would be better utilized and accommodated. So I'll take it from here. Council is aware that the Regional Municipality of Niagara has prepared hamlet policies and defined them as being lower density settlement areas. These areas are typically privately serviced and provide housing, social, cultural, and commercial services for those surrounding agricultural and rural uses. The region's policy states no new hamlets are to be permitted in unique agricultural areas. And I would argue at this particular point that Ridgeville and along sections of Canberra are far from new, probably predated much of the Planning Act in Ontario. Presently, Pelham's official plan designates some land in Ridgeville as rural commercial. The plan also designates the obvious settlement areas along Canberra and a portion of Effingham Street as village residential. So that's in your currently plan. Pelham's newly adopted plan, and not yet approved, redesignates the area of Ridgeville and Canberra as specialty agricultural. This designation recognizes crops as the primary commercial use. The plan restricts non-agricultural uses which constrain or negatively impact upon the specialty crop land. The adopted plan does not recognize the rural commercial or village residential land uses. Council may wish to amend this oversight in light of existing or newly established uses. I've noticed in your bylaw there's a lot of exceptions and special provisions that have been provided for along sections of Canberra and other areas. So that in itself perhaps leads that Canberra and Effingham are somewhat special. The Greenbelt plan identifies the Ridgeville and Canberra areas as tenderfruit and grapeland. The Greenbelt plan has accommodated North Pelham and Fenwick as village or hamlet within the designation. One would anticipate Ridgeville to be entitled to the same designation had the town accommodated in its new official plan. I understand that the intent of the province is to define and accommodate the fine details of land use planning as left it up to the local municipalities. I think that's where the local municipalities have to step forward. And it's also really mentioned in Bill 26. Municipal councils are given greater control over the expansion of urban settlement areas, including villages, hamlets, rural clusters, and rural settlement areas. Municipal council decisions regarding changes to the urban settlement area boundaries would not be appealed to the OMB. And I think that's what my last sentence says. By not establishing the appropriate boundaries may potentially lead to abuse of land uses. Ridgeville is not a new hamlet and should be defined and appropriately designated. In recognition of the need to address the growth plan, I'm of the opinion that designating lands which recognize a long-established land use pattern will not offend the intent and purpose of that particular plan. Why the need for a hamlet recognition and designation? The establishment of a hamlet designation will permit established uses within this designation to be appropriately recognized and zoned accordingly. This will then permit appropriate zoning standards to be established and administered under the building code without the intervention of another level of government. And we're going back to the green plan at that time. Attempting to provide for zoning of existing residential, commercial uses in a yet undetermined agricultural or tender fruit land or grape land will be difficult and does not make sense. At this time, I suggest council may want to direct staff to take the appropriate actions, and they may be considerable, in processing official plan amendment and recognizing the existing developments of Ridgeville and Canberra roads. That's my submission at this particular time. I'm here to answer any questions if any of the councilors have them.
Thank you very much for your submission. We appreciate that, and I wonder if any members of council have any questions for our presenter. Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and through you to the presenter, thank you very much for making this presentation today. In the interest of full disclosure, we've had this conversation
Yes.
prior to you presenting this, and Mr. Ratina, we have had as well. And I asked you in our discussion, and I ask you to answer for the benefit of all of us. What do you see as being the practical impact of that change in designation? For example, excuse me, what is it that Mr. Ratina would want to be able to do with his property as a result of the property being zoned within a hamlet that he currently cannot do?
Okay, I'll have to also say that in looking at the area as a planner, I've just not confined myself to my clients' lands. I've looked at a plan that has a lot of small parcels in that particular area, along Canberra, it's a Cream, the Center Street or something, that whole area, and I'm thinking, wow, they're really, really small. And I've looked at your agricultural zoning, the minimum lot size for agricultural lands is, I believe, 25 acres, 600 feet of frontage. I says, these lots have no way comply with those particular rules and regulations at this current time. And I'm thinking, there is an established pattern along Ridgeville and along Canberra Road where these small lots, perhaps, and even with some minor additions, may encourage some of the smaller backlands. And you may, as council, simply say, maybe we'll consider this if your property could join with this other 10 or 15 acre beside it. So that'll encourage those lands to become bigger and more viable. Right now, I don't think you can really afford to have a farmer go in there and buy the kind of equipment that he would need for a 10 or 15 acre parcel of land. You know, I imagine maybe there's a lot of sharing, and maybe there's just a lot of small little gardens that people have that are selling their fruits and vegetables on at this point in time. And we won't necessarily take away from that, but I think ultimately if you're trying to do what the province is asking you to do, you really have to think outside the box and say, how can we encourage a fairly viable farming operation to establish itself within the confines of those boundaries while still maintaining the, and I still think Canberra is one of the nicest rides that I take on my way up to Port Dover or Simcoe in that particular direction rather than the number 20. I just, my wife and I just seem to enjoy it, and I think it has something to offer people that want to go in that particular direction rather than not doing anything and having the land simply deteriorate, because there's no incentive for people to do anything other than simply stay there, and if the house deteriorates, it's going to continue, and because they won't regain the incentive to maintain them and what have you. There's not enough money to get off the lands. So that's how I look at it.
Right, thank you. Councillor, any?
Thank you. So as I understand it, what you're suggesting is that the recognition of that part of Pelham as a hamlet would bring to it some attention, some recognition, and that would encourage a kind of activity, an agricultural activity, in your view,
And I think that
currently would not be going on.
Yes, and I think that would add strength to the backlands where you will maybe have farmers that are still there being able to put together the size of the parcels that they really need, that they can do more with it. Okay, and that's how I envisage that particular area going. And you still maintain the attractiveness of Canberra, and I really, like I say, that and Fenwick, when you go into that, it's just, there's kind of a continuing pattern, a land use pattern that's established itself.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Other questions for our presenter? I have one question, and it really stems from a conversation that we had around this table, councilors, last week. Last week, we were talking about a particular land that was designated, and we learned that under the official plan, once that's adopted, it sort of compels us to zone something a certain way, and that was sort of part of the argument that was put into place. So you were saying tonight that those lands right there, where there's stores and there's, you know, activities going on and all of that, they're currently in the plan that's been approved, specialty agriculture, tender fruit and grape. So,
Yeah, one would almost think that they almost become non-conforming, legal non-conforming uses in a way, and one would gain that. Now, I know you can make special exceptions and provisions, but that kind of messes up your zoning bylaw, because then what it does is opens the door that maybe others in other streets and other roads would expect the same to apply to it, when it's not your intention to do so. So, you know, in the hopes of saying, yeah, well, if we write into the zoning bylaw these things, maybe we can kind of shoehorn that in there. But it's not a clear-cut definition. And I think in having dealt with the bylaw in Niagara Falls for many years, I was drawn into it when it was already underway for 12 years and not going anywhere, and it took another 8 years to bring that to fruition. And Niagara Falls was quite fortunate in that way, because they were updating the bylaw, and they've had a couple of consultants come in, and they decided not to do that. They just simply updated the current bylaw, which made me happy too, because I was involved with it.
but in terms of, so it's currently zoned, there's currently in this area that you're talking about, there's specific zoning, but it would sort of compel us to move away from that.
Well,
Is that how you're understanding it as well?
the current zoning, as I see it, I've only seen the new plan doesn't provide that kind of direction. So you should be doing and changing that zoning or accommodating it within the, and I don't see those two blending. I'm looking to say, no, a definitive bounding zoning and the boundary is more definitive, doesn't lead to people abusing, sneaking things into another section of the land because it extends further back on their lot. No, you've got a boundary, you've got a zoning line established, and you can work within those parameters. And hopefully, if you happen to get a couple of extra houses going in, it doesn't really hurt anything, as long as those backlands that they do own can be consolidated, and you do get your larger pieces. And I think that's what takes you in the direction that the province really intends people to go.
Okay. Thank you very much for answering the questions, and thank you for, oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Durley does have another question for you.
Just one question, Mr. Mayor, and not necessarily to the presenter, but I'm just wondering, with the official plan having been sent for approval and in fact it under appeal, is there any impact of those actions to a possible official plan amendment? I'm wondering about the logistics there, and perhaps they should go to through to the planner. It's to me, there seems to be a problem in my mind. It's the official plan is there, it's completed. We're waiting for an OMB appeal to be heard in order to make it official, and we're possibly talking about an amendment. I'm just wondering the logistics, and just
Okay,
for
so
curiosity's sake.
You don't want to hear from the presenter, you want to hear from staff on that, Councillor?
Well, okay, I could hear from both, because you do mention the amendment in your presentation, sir, so, you know, perhaps we can get...
Let's start there, and then we'll hear from Ms. Smythe. How's
Yeah, that would be fine,
Okay.
just to clear this.
I would have much preferred perhaps it be directed to your solicitor, because he could perhaps is more familiar with the process at that particular level when it's going before the board. I'm of the view that if you make the necessary changes at this point in time, the board maybe consider it during the whole process that's still underway in terms of its approval. So I think if you lead it and you find the support for it, and it's just a matter of putting it in, and I can see where the board may very well simply saying it's been supported, and you may get one or two other objections to it, but you're also dealing with objections and changes now. So if you feel within your heart that this makes sense, and move it forward, and then perhaps put it within that stream. And then it would, then obviously the other changes have to take place. But that may be a place to start and discuss with your solicitor.
Okay. Ms. Smythe, anything to add to that?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, through to you. Of the 3 appeals on the official plan, none of the appeals had any relation to the hamlet policies. And so therefore, those policies are not up for any modifications at this point in time. Both the town council as well as the regional council both adopted and approved those policies. Of the appellants, one of them being the province, none of those policies were under any type of scrutiny or modification potential. And so to go back into...
And I don't think we had any objections or to the hamlet policies themselves. We just had an application to designate these lands to a hamlet designation. And there's no offense taken to the hamlet policies that the region's considering. So I don't think we would be in objection to it. We just are looking to say perhaps there should be additional lands added to that. And
If I
that's
might,
how it's-
Ms. Smythe,
sure.
and I think you should address
Yeah.
the chair on this, but, so it sounds like there's some information that we're missing here, really. Councilor Durley, is there anything further on that point that you'd like to ask either Ms. Smythe or the presenter?
I'm just wondering if something like this would complicate the OMB matter. That's
Yeah, so-
the problem, that I don't want to complicate that any more than it is. That's why I asked the
Okay.
question.
And I think Ms. Smythe indicated that it might, so, or
Good.
that her,
Considering of the policies that are under appeal by the different appellants, none of these policies were under any discussion. So, and with respect to adding these lands into that designation, it would require a municipal comprehensive review. And that's quite a significant undertaking, and there would need to be justification for that.
thank you for
Thank you.
that. Any further questions at this point? And I know we do have a report coming. We had some discussion last council meeting, and then now some more information this council meeting. So we anticipate that there will be a report coming forward from staff to answer some of these questions. We did hear some of that last week, and no doubt your presentation this evening will form part of that report as well. So
Say a few words.
I think your time is up, Mr. Ratina. Is there new information that you need to? I'll give you 1 minute. How's that sound?
I spoke in front of the region. This was you were there, I don't know, a month and a half ago, and quite a few things were brought out there. And one of the things that I think some of the people were not aware is the property across the road from me on the east side of Effingham Street at one time were designated for a subdivision. And that was by Mr. Schultz and a few other of his business partners. But because of other financial commitments, they sort of dropped it. And going back to my property, we purchased that property in the early 60s. We could not make a living. Father had to work in a Union Carbide. I taught school, and then after retired, I did some farming, but got black knot disease, had to pull all the trees out. The land stayed empty. I rented it out to a nursery. They didn't stay long because it's dry. Nothing grows in sand. It's all sandy. And so right now it's going to start growing weeds. All the lands north of me have all been infilled towards Highway 20. There's beautiful homes have gone up there. Beautiful homes south of Canberra Road and east and west of Canberra Road have gone up. And I'm going to be growing weeds. Now my front part is rural commercial. It's been that since 1987 when we got the application through. All the lands north of Canberra Road up to the Bell Telephone, and behind the Bell Telephone were to be rural commercial. Right now, the people across the street are asking, where can we park? We have no parking. And I said, well, we have to do something with that front part. And the only reason, if I could do something with the front part, I need to do something with the back part, which would be residential, small estate lots or whatever has to be done. And then the front part, as I was telling some members on council, would be great to put a little parking lot. You know, I'd be willing to give some of my property so that these store owners would have place to park. Right now, there's a sign 2-hour parking, and usually my driveway, not that I use it, because the house is empty, And it's going to be empty because the Mexican workers that work for different farmers in the area have gone back. The farmer now doesn't want to rent it. He says, I've got another place, so the house is going to be empty. And for me to get somebody in there that's going to cause problems, I'd rather leave it empty and see what we can do. If I get this designation as a hamlet, as the region told me, he says, if the town decides to support this, he says, we support it 100%. And so this is what I'm here asking, if at all possible, to make Ridgeville look, I mean, the corner of Ridgeville is gorgeous. You got flower pots hanging, lights and interlocking brick, a beautiful sign, but that lawn in the front, well, that's an eyesore. It really is. You know, I cut it, but my wife says, leave it, let it grow like the hay. But I don't want to do that.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rutin. I think that helps in terms of the response from the region. I know that some members of council were asking about that. So I think we should leave it at that. There is a report that we've asked staff to come back with, and maybe that can form part of it as well. So I do have a motion moved by Councillor Ribbiak, seconded by Councillor King, that the information submitted by the delegation, Stanley Rutina and Dennis Savringa, be received. Any other comments? I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion's carried, and we look forward to that report, and I would ask that staff pre-circulate you on that report when it comes back to us. Thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. Next on the agenda is a report of Regional Councillor Beatty. Perhaps he was, I thought he would be here this evening, but he's not, so we'll have to catch him next time. So we look forward to that discussion based on all of the committee reports we had in January and other reports. And unfortunately, I'm not prepared to do that this evening. Next on our agenda is the adoption of minutes, and it has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Lane, that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. The first is from our regular meeting of council on January 13th, and the second is of our special meeting of council on January 15th, which was the strategic planning session. Any errors or omissions on that? I do note that the clerk in her eagle eyes noted that there is another line on the strat plan that needs to be drawn. I think that's the only major change on that. Anything? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. The next issue is business arising from the minutes. The first item of business has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Lane, that the strategic planning workshop notes and challenge map from the strategic planning workshop held on January 15th, 2014 be received. Perhaps my comments should have been here instead of on the minutes. Any discussion points on that? It was a great session. Certainly some new and revised focus for the town. Different planks for moving forward, and they included promoting fairness and equality, maintaining our small town feel while we grow, providing for environment for economic prosperity, and engaging residents in decision making, and finally enhancing the quality of life in our town are the 5 goals in which we want to attain and work on the mission. How might we serve and enhance our unique blend of urban and rural lifestyles, and all of that for the vision, how might we become the most vibrant, creative, and caring community in Niagara. I will note that there's other work that each member of council and members of staff have taken, little small groups that will be meeting over the coming week to help sort of mesh the old plan with the new direction and with the new goals. So we look forward to that coming forward, I believe, at our next meeting. Is that correct? Mr. CEO, that's the intention, will come forward? Okay. Thank you very much. So without further ado, I will call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Also, business arising, we have it moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak, that the consolidated plan for a multi-purpose community complex submitted by Leisure Plan International regarding recreational facilities in the town of Pelham be received. Couple 100-page document that was submitted to council and is available on the website, I presume. Any questions, comments? We're receiving it at this point. Next steps, Mr. CAO.
Next up, Mr. Mayor, is the capital plan and the operational plan. That'll be coming to council for consideration in approximately 5 weeks.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Councillor Papp, you had something?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. CEO, when, and then following that, would we then go to the general public? Is that the idea?
That is a possibility through you, Mr. Mayor, but council is yet to provide that direction to me.
Right, that's what I figured. Okay, so we need to start, that's right. It's
Discuss
up to
that.
us, we have to discuss that.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. Next item is consent agenda items to be considered in block. Are there any items that members of council would like to consider separately and not part of the block? Councillor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to lift Council of the Whole recommendation by number CW 2014-013.1002. This is with regard to permissive grants. I'd like to lift that recommendation for separate discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any others? So we'll move with the block first, Councillor. It's been moved by Councillor Durley, second by Councillor Ribbiak, that the following consent agenda items be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. 1, recommendations of Committee of the Whole for January 13th, save and except for that item regarding permissive grants. The second, minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting on January 13th, 2014. The third, action correspondence of a routine nature. The first is a letter of resignation from Chris Bellinazzo, and Councillor Durley related this to us at our last meeting, and certainly this would allow us to receive that resignation with regret, and we certainly thank her for her service. The next is the Fenwick Revitalization Plans, a letter from Marjorie Poley with that it be referred to staff for consideration in the Fenwick Revitalization Plans. And the third, a letter from In the Orchard, an in-kind request of using the arena for Saturday art camps that they provided for that use for an 8-week art camp as described in the letter. Any discussion on any of those items? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Councillor Ribbiak, you lifted the permissive grant item under the recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a motion with regard to postponing that item for discussion at our next meeting, perhaps on February 3rd. This to give staff perhaps the opportunity to provide us with the information that we asked them about in our last meeting, which I don't think we've received just yet. And second, to allow us the opportunity to review the criteria by which we have asked staff to judge applications for permissive grants, just to reaffirm in our own minds that this is indeed as we want permissive grants to be given, and to kind of take a second look at this. I know we had discussion in our last meeting that suggested that perhaps some of us were not entirely comfortable with the recommendations that were made. This will give us the opportunity, I think, to put our discomfort to rest or to take action going forward. So if seconded, I'd like to make that.
Okay, so in essence, your motion is to postpone consideration of it pending additional information from staff, which was talked about, I believe, financial statements, et cetera. And then also you're looking now for the criteria upon which those permissive grants were judged.
Indeed.
Is that correct? Okay,
Yes.
is there a seconder for that? Councillor Lane will second that. Any discussion to the postponement? So it'll be to the February 3rd. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. I look forward to the discussion on February 3rd. Thank you. The next item has been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey, that the issue summary report regarding the short-term disability policy be received, and that policy S301-27, the short-term disability, be approved, and that the clerk be directed to prepare the necessary bylaw to repeal bylaw 1664, and that's from all the way back in 1994, for inclusion on the February 3rd, 2014 council agenda. Any discussion regarding this? Councillor Papp.
A very quick question, through you, Mr. Mayor, to either the CEO or the treasurer. When it refers to assist in recovery of an illness, am I to assume, or is it implied that illness would include not just physical illness, but other forms of illness as defined for medical purposes? Mental illness, is that's implied? Okay.
Treasurer?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you.
As certified by a physician that would concur that that's the request. Okay, that's good.
All right,
That's
thank
all.
you.
I wanted to be clear on that.
Thank you. And I do want to thank staff for being very clear in terms of the red line version, what's being proposed is amended, and I think it's very helpful.
Yep.
And it fulfills the discussion that we had at our policy and priorities meeting. Any further discussion? Thank you for answering that question. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried, and we look forward to that bylaw. Thank you. The next item has been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey, that the draft minutes of the joint meeting between the Pelham Council and the Pelham Library Board held on December 9th, 2013 be received. Are we out of order here? Did we? That might be out of order here. That was from last meeting. You know what? That's from last meeting. Sorry?
No, we're on to.
No, it's not. I think we are on to.
We had that last meeting, so that's not a.
Sorry.
That was our last meeting. We had those minutes, and we have the discussion coming up on Thursday. So, we have, this is again,
No bylaws. Yeah.
okay. Sorry about that, ladies and gentlemen. We are now at resolution to move in camera. We do not have P&P this evening, but we have several items in camera, and we'll now move to move into closed session. And it's been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Lane. Be it resolved that the next portion of the meeting be closed to the public in order to consider the following. 1. Item under Section 239-2D, Labor Relations or Employee Negotiations, 2 items. And 2. Item under Section 239-2C, a proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, 2 items. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. We will now move into closed session. Thank you.
I need you to sign off. Laughing at me.
Okay.
Thank you. It has been moved by Councillor Kersey, second by Councillor Lane, that council adjourn the in-camera session, and that council do now rise with report. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. We've now risen with report, and the report is, I need a mover and a seconder for this, that council hereby approves the purchase of lands from Mr. D. Robertson, being part of Lot 177, former Township of Thorold, now the Town of Pelham, and shown as Part 5 on the sketch provided, dated October 28th, 2013, prepared by Matthews, Cameron, Haywood, Carey Tea House Surveying Limited, attached. I need a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey. Any discussion? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. It has been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor King, that the following bylaw be read a first, second, and third time and passed. Bylaw 3457, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the town of Pelham at its regular meeting held on the 20th day of January 2014. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. It's been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor King, that this regular meeting of council be adjourned until our next regular meeting scheduled for Monday, February 3rd, 2014, unless sooner called by the mayor. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Oh.